Aha! The scream tore through the early morning darkness, jarring me awake before my alarm. The next thing I heard was the shower running. Someone had turned it on, but it wasn't me. I shot up in bed, heart pounding, trying to get my bearings. The sheets next to me were crumpled and empty. Diana always got up early, but this was different. My mind felt hazy with leftover fragments of a restless night's sleep. I swung my feet to the floor, letting them press against the cold hardwood. My heart hammered in my chest, and I wondered if the scream had been real or just a nightmare. But the hiss of running water was unmistakable, along with the faint sound of muffled voices, more than one. I pulled on a t-shirt, stepping out into the hallway. The bathroom door was partially open, a sliver of yellow light cutting across the hallway. Steam swirled, drifting into the cool air. Diana's hushed voice whispered, urgent, anxious. Then a low male murmur responded. It took me only 3 seconds to realize what was happening. That voice didn't belong to me. Instantly, my pulse spiked, my stomach lurched. My mind flashed back to all the small signs. Her late-night text messages, the chocolates in our son's backpack signed Uncle Ray, the ticket stub to a barbershop I'd never visited. I had forced myself to ignore it all. Blame it on jealousy, blame it on paranoia. I swallowed hard. The guilt that knotted inside me. Guilt that maybe I hadn't been enough. That maybe I had messed up along the way. Flared up in a hot wave. But guilt turned to anger in a heartbeat. Something in me snapped like a wire pulled too tight. My breath caught, loud enough that Diana must have heard it. The hush behind the bathroom door broke. Water shut off suddenly. A voice hissed, "He's up." But it was too late. I slammed the door open. Steam slapped my face, so thick I could barely see. Still, I made out 2 silhouettes. Diana pressed against the tile, and Ray Montoya, dark hair slicked back, water dripping from his shoulders, turning to face me as though he'd been caught in a crime. In that moment, everything slowed. My world narrowed to the glisten of droplets on his chest, to the flush on Diana's face, to the swirl of steam that refused to conceal them. Fury, hurt, and betrayal collided inside me, white-hot and overwhelming. What the hell? I snarled, voice coming out in a ragged burst. Diana pressed herself against the shower wall, her arms crossed over her chest. Ray stared at me, eyes wide, chest heaving. He said nothing, just raised his hands in a feeble gesture, as though it might calm me down. I lurched forward, fists clenched so tight they shook. My head pounded with the same rhythm as my heart, and each breath felt too shallow. The guilt was there, yes, a strange sense that maybe this was somehow my fault, but overshadowed now by raw, explosive anger. How long? My voice sounded strangled, like I was choking on the words. How many times? Diana opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Ray carefully stepped aside, water beating off him, and onto the tile. I could smell the faint mixture of her shampoo and his aftershave, mingling in the thick steam. If I hadn't already been in a rage, that smell would have done it, the smell of them, so intimately blended. I pointed at Ray, my arm rigid. Out. I hissed. Get out of my house. Now. He didn't argue. He tried to grab a towel, but I batted his hand away in a furious, jerking move. Diana grabbed one off the rack and tossed it at him. He held it against himself as he staggered out the door, slipping past me without meeting my eyes. I was shaking so badly I almost followed to throw him out bodily, but I forced myself to stay. The moment he vanished into the hallway, I whirled around to Diana, voice near a roar. Explain. She stood there, droplets sliding down her shoulders, her hair plastered to her face, shivering, whether from cold or fear, I couldn't tell. Ethan, I didn't want you to find out this way. I barked a hollow laugh, and how was I supposed to find out? A text message. A note in my lunch bag. She bowed her head. It wasn't supposed to happen at all. I swear it just. Her words trailed off. I stared at her, chest heaving, wanting to demand more answers. But the sound of my son's voice, half asleep and confused, "Dad," floated from the hallway. Right then, everything in me went still. I swallowed, forcing some mask of composure onto my face. I took a deep breath, voice low and precise, as if I were interrogating a suspect. "Get dressed," I told her. "We'll talk later." She started to speak, but I spun on my heel and walked out, shutting the door firmly behind me. My son stood in the hallway, rubbing his eyes. "Dad, is everything okay?" I crouched down, resting a hand on his shoulder, forcing a smile that probably looked shaky. "Yeah, bud. Just grown-up stuff." I guided him back to his room, my mind still buzzing with that final image of Diana in the shower with Ray, an image that would haunt me. I found Ray in the living room, pulling on his jeans with trembling hands, shirtless and dripping. Everything about him, his youth, his confident posture, even the way he styled his hair, cracked my self-control. My voice stayed low, but it shook with rage. "You have 10 seconds to leave." He nodded, not meeting my eyes. "I'm sorry," he muttered, fumbling with his shoes. "You should be," I said, "but not to me. To my son." He opened his mouth as if to argue, maybe to ask how my son factored into all this, then thought better of it, and laced up the second sneaker. His footsteps thundered in my ears as he fled the house. The front door clicked shut behind him. In my head, it sounded final, like a gunshot that signaled something irreversibly broken. I spent the rest of the morning pretending for my son. I made him breakfast, same as always, scrambled eggs, toast, orange juice. We talked about soccer practice, about his upcoming history project. Every time he laughed, something twisted inside my chest. When he left the kitchen, I took out one of those small envelopes where I'd been stashing money just in case. I counted the bills, thinking about running. But run where? He's not mine. Not biologically. I found that out 3 months ago in the worst possible way. A half-crumpled note hidden in his backpack. For my beloved nephew, Uncle Ray. A chocolate bar, too. That single clue turned my world upside down. I did a DNA test. Stupid, maybe, but I had to know. When it confirmed my darkest suspicions, I hid it in an old book on the top shelf, right beside a battered ticket stub from Ray's barbershop. I wanted to confront them both, but a sick, guilty part of me believed I deserved this. Maybe I wasn't good enough. Maybe I was too absent, too dull. Who knows? So I kept quiet. For my boy's sake. Because no matter whose blood runs in his veins, I'm the one who taught him to ride a bike, to read, to fish. I'm the one he calls Dad. My son left for school, the door clicking gently behind him. And then, in the silence, I turned toward the bedroom. Diana was there, sitting on the edge of the bed, hair wrapped in a towel, eyes red from crying. She put on a robe and looked numb, as if her mind had shut off to escape the shame or the fear. I closed the door. My movements felt methodical, like I was still in shock. "Where do I begin?" I said, my voice quiet. "I'm trying to figure out how we got here." She sniffed, drawing her robe tighter. "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't change anything, but I am." "Sorry you did it," I replied, "or sorry I found out." She pressed her lips together. "Both." I paced near the window, my voice measured like an interrogation. "How long has this been going on?" "No, don't lie to me." She looked down at her hands. "A few months." "A few months," I repeated. My jaw twitched, and my son. Her eyes flicked to mine. Panic there. "He's ours, Ethan." "Don't." I snarled. "I know the truth." She inhaled sharply. "Okay," she managed. "Yes, Ray is." I held up a hand, and she stopped. My stomach churned. That boy in the other room. I've raised him from day one. He's my whole life. And you let me do it, all the while letting Ray buy him treats, sign notes, Uncle. Tears welled in her eyes. "I never meant for it to happen. You have to believe me. Why him? I asked, face hot with anger, but voice so calm it frightened me. Why a damn barber named Ray? She shook her head. He was exciting, she whispered. I'd go in for a trim, and he listened. He made me feel special. We'd meet for coffee. It turned into something more. Ethan, I swear, I never wanted to break us like this. A wave of bitter laughter forced itself from my chest. My next words shot out, harsh and fast. Special. Right. I thought of the silent morning I'd woken to, the water running, the shock that still buzzed in my veins. Congratulations, you got it. She huddled into herself. I love you, she choked out. I do. I laughed again, a sharp, ugly sound. Then I spat. If this is love, I'd hate to see the alternative. She began sobbing, shoulders shaking, but I was already walking away. My hand shook so badly, I had to grip the doorframe to steady myself. I'm taking a few days, I muttered. Don't follow me. I grabbed a jacket from the closet, ignoring the faint scent of Diana's perfume clinging to the collar. The same jacket I'd been meaning to take to the dry cleaners for weeks now. Funny how I used to like that smell. Downstairs, I stuffed clothes into a small duffel. On my way out, I paused by the old bookshelf, grabbed the hidden DNA results, and tucked them into the bag. If I left them behind, I feared I'd come home to find them gone, replaced by more lies. Within minutes, I was on the road, the city's outskirts giving way to open highway. I didn't know where I was going. Maybe a motel a few hours away, just to breathe. My phone buzzed with messages I refused to read. Diana's, presumably. My mind was a hurricane of betrayal, anger, guilt, heartbreak. And a voice in my head kept repeating, time doesn't heal, it erases. I wondered if that was true. Because right now, I needed to erase everything. I ended up at a roadside motel. Dim neon sign blinking. The clerk gave me a key with a bored glance. The room smelled faintly of stale cigarette smoke and cleaning chemicals. I dropped my bag on the bed, slumped onto a creaky chair by the window, and stared at the flicker of headlights passing by. I tried to piece together my next move. My thoughts spun in circles. Should I divorce her? File custody claims, though how do I even approach that when I'm not biologically his father? Should I tear Ray's face off, or keep silent for the sake of my boy's future? When my phone buzzed again, I finally looked. Messages from my sister, some old college buddies, one from a group chat about an upcoming high school reunion. And yes, more texts from Diana, begging for a chance to talk, to explain. My chest tightened as I read them. Explain what? That I'd been replaced long ago. That they'd stolen the paternal role from me. I had no space in my head for more deception. I turned off my phone, tossed it onto the bed, and let the darkness swallow me. Days blurred together. I visited a local diner for meals, flipping through a battered paperback to distract myself. Even so, I'd catch glimpses of couples sipping coffee, of children whining for more syrup on their pancakes, and feel a knife twisting inside my chest. That was supposed to be me. That was supposed to be my family. Between meals and restless pacing, I reread the DNA results, though I had them memorized. Probability of paternity, 0%. Those words never got easier to see. Sometimes I pictured Ray's smug grin, or the faint amusement in his eyes, and wanted to punch a hole in the wall. Then guilt would flood back in, telling me I must have failed. Men who keep their wives happy don't lose them to random barbers. On the third day, I realized I'd run out of money. The envelopes of emergency cash were never meant for indefinite hiding. This was half my paycheck, stashed away over weeks for a crisis. Now the crisis was here, and it was burning through my small savings. So I packed up, checked out of the motel, and drove home. It was night when I arrived. The house was dark, except for a single lamp in the living room. I entered quietly, half expecting to see Ray's shoes by the door. But it was just Diana, curled up on the couch. Her eyes were rimmed with shadows, face pale. She sat up as soon as she saw me. "Where have you been?" "I've been worried sick." I snorted. "Worried? That's new." She winced. "Ethan, I waved her off, crossing the living room. "Where's our son?" "In his room. He's asleep." I set my bag down, taking a deep breath. The jacket I wore still smelled like her perfume. Apparently it clung longer than I ever realized. "We'll talk tomorrow," I said, voice flat. "I'm too tired to do this now." She nodded, looking fragile and frightened, but didn't protest. I climbed the stairs to peek in on my boy. He was sprawled in bed, mouth open in the total abandon of sleep. My heart squeezed at the sight of him. He looked so peaceful, so innocent. I wanted to tuck him in, but I also didn't trust myself not to break down in tears, so I just whispered, "Good night, buddy," and left quietly. In the master bedroom, I lay awake for hours, Diana in the next room. She must have taken a pillow and gone to sleep somewhere else, because she never came in. My mind churned, thoughts boiling. Even after 3 days, it wasn't any easier. Next morning, after my son got on the bus, Diana and I stood face to face in the kitchen. She looked determined, but hollow. "Ethan," she began, "I want to save our marriage." I almost laughed in her face, but the sincerity in her eyes made me hesitate. "You want me to forget that I found you in the shower with Ray Montoya. You want me to forget he's the father of our son." She swallowed. "Not forget, but we can move forward. We can try counseling." My fists clenched at my sides. "Why'd you hide the paternity for all these years? Why pretend?" A tear slid down her cheek. "Because I was scared," she whispered. "When I got pregnant, I was scared you'd leave. And then you were so happy about the baby, so ready to be a father. I couldn't take that away from you. I couldn't. And Ray, well, he didn't want to be tied down." I stared at her, a flurry of rage and painful gratitude swirling inside me. Because ironically, raising my son was the one good thing in my life, even if it was all based on a lie. "Let's talk about this later," I muttered. "I have to go to work." She opened her mouth to protest, but I grabbed my keys and left, not wanting to be late for my first day back at the high school. School offered me a temporary escape. Grading essays, leading discussions, those routine tasks calmed me. But between classes, I caught myself drifting, haunted by images. The water, the steam, Ray's face, Diana's pleading, my own shame and anger swirling in an endless loop. I'd shake my head and refocus on the lesson plan, but the knot in my stomach never loosened. After the last bell rang, I stayed in my classroom, tidying up. That's when one of my colleagues, Mark, poked his head in. "Hey, Ethan, you still heading to the reunion next week?" I'd forgotten about it entirely. Our high school reunion. I shrugged. "Maybe." "Oh, come on," he said. "People are dying to see you. Heard you married that gorgeous girl from our year, Diana, right?" I forced a tight smile, ignoring the sting of that remark. "Yeah, we'll see." As Mark left, I realized I had no desire to parade my failing marriage in front of old classmates. Then again, part of me felt a twisted pull, an urge to show up and lay everything bare, to remind them I existed, that I wasn't just some footnote in Diana's love story with Ray Montoya. I exhaled, turned off the lights, and headed home. That evening, I found the house quiet. Diana was in the kitchen, sipping tea, flipping through a magazine. She eyed me nervously as I walked in. "I made dinner, if you're hungry." I looked at the food, my stomach too knotted to feel any appetite. "I'm good," I mumbled. She set her tea aside and stood up. Her eyes flicked to me, anxious. "I need to know how you feel. Are we going to try or not?" My blood pressure spiked. Part of me wanted to shout that I'd never forgive her. Another part felt sick at the thought of losing my son, who was biologically Ray's. Legally, I was on the birth certificate, but I knew how ugly these things could get. "What do you want from me?" I said, my voice trembling despite my best effort to sound composed. To act like none of it happened. No, she whispered. I just want a chance to make it right. Words erupted from me, seething with bitterness. What's right about me raising another man's son for 8 years with no clue? What's right about that man still sneaking around? She flinched. He won't come around anymore. I promise. It's over. I couldn't help a harsh laugh. You think it's that simple? The conversation escalated, tension swirling. She moved closer, voice rising. I stepped back, avoiding her outstretched hand. My breathing turned ragged, and for a moment, it felt like a fight scene in a movie. The pace quickening. The hush before the punch. I'm not letting him near our son, I growled, half yelling, half choking on the words. Diana's voice shot back, high and quavering. He doesn't want custody, Ethan. He doesn't want the responsibility. Good, I snarled. Because if he tries, my fists balled, nails biting into my palms. We glared at each other, breath coming in short bursts. Slowly, like we both realized we'd gone too far, we backed off. She sank into a chair, tears brimming in her eyes. I pressed my fingertips to my temples, struggling to calm down. Then I turned away, heading upstairs without another word. In the weeks that followed, we lived in uneasy limbo. I slept in the guest room. She tiptoed around me, no longer wearing the perfume that once clung to my jacket, as if she thought its scent alone might set me off. I avoided any real conversation with her, focusing on my son and my job. Our son, oblivious to the true depth of what was going on, sensed tension. He asked, "Are you mad at Mom? Why are you in the other room?" My heart broke every time. I'd reassure him with something vague. Dad just has trouble sleeping sometimes, or your mom's been snoring a bit, said with a forced grin. But he wasn't fooled. Kids sense lies like predators sense fear. One evening, rummaging through my closet, I found an old book, the same one where I'd hidden the DNA test. I flipped through the pages, found the sealed envelope. The note inside it still read the same. My chest tightened. I pictured confronting Diana again, waving those results in her face. But what good would that do? She knew the truth. I'd never had the nerve to tell my son. And maybe I never would. That boy meant everything to me, no matter who fathered him. Then I caught a glimpse of an invitation for the reunion, pinned to the corkboard in our hallway. A wave of bitterness rolled through me. If I showed up, people would see the cracks in my marriage. Maybe they'd judge me or pity me. But I found myself wanting to go. Perhaps part of me wanted the closure, some final stand in front of the people who'd known us back then, who remembered the wide-eyed teenage lovers we used to be. I also remembered that I'd told Diana once I'd wear that coat that smelled like her. I hadn't washed it yet, maybe out of some twisted nostalgia. Now it felt like a relic of a past I couldn't reclaim. The night of the reunion arrived. I drove alone. Diana stayed home, claiming a headache, but I suspected she was terrified to face everyone after what she'd done. My chest felt tight as I parked outside the venue, a lodge near a small lake, with a bonfire out back. Old memories flooded in, senior year pranks, prom night, the time Diana and I had shared a bench by the lake and whispered about our future. I swallowed hard and stepped into the crisp evening air. A group of old classmates stood by the fire, passing around marshmallows, talking loudly. They looked over as I approached, conversation drifting off. At first, no one said a word. They recognized me but stared as if seeing a ghost. I was wearing that damn coat, and sure enough, I could still catch faint hints of Diana's perfume. The smell clung to me like a mocking presence. I took a shaky breath, then said, "Yeah, it's me, Ethan Thomas. I know it's been a while." Someone cleared their throat. Another offered a half smile. Then Mark, who was among them, mumbled, "Where's Diana?" "She's at home," I answered, my tone short and clipped. A ripple of whispers went around the circle. People always expect to see high school sweethearts together at reunions. I jammed my hands into my pockets, scanning the faces, feeling like an intruder. But yeah, I added, voice rough, she's the same one. The one you remember, my wife. A tense pause. A few folks nodded. No one pressed further. But I saw the pity in their eyes, the curiosity they were too polite to voice. Where is she, really? Why do you look so torn up? I forced a smile, feeling that old guilt surface again. Guilt that somehow I'd failed as a husband. But I didn't elaborate. I didn't say a single word about the betrayal, or the shower, or Ray Montoya's existence. I wouldn't. Not for Diana's sake, but for my son's. Let them think we were simply struggling, or that she decided not to show up. I'd carry this alone. After a few awkward minutes, the group resumed small talk. I listened to their chatter, feeling disconnected. The bonfire popped and crackled. Someone handed me a paper cup of cheap beer. I sipped it, the bitterness matching my mood. Eventually, I drifted away, wandering to the edge of the lake. The moon glimmered on the water. I stood there, fighting the urge to break down. My chest felt raw, like I'd been holding back tears for weeks. In the distance, I heard faint laughter and music from the lodge. This was supposed to be a nostalgic night. Instead, all I felt was emptiness. Time doesn't heal, I thought. It erases. Perhaps eventually, I'd forget this searing betrayal, or at least grow numb to it. But not now. Days passed. After the reunion, the tension at home solidified into quiet acceptance. We danced around each other, uncertain. Diana insisted she'd cut contact with Ray, that he wasn't calling or texting anymore. I didn't press for proof. A part of me didn't want to find out it was another lie. Then one afternoon after school, I found a note in my son's backpack while checking his homework. It read, "For my favorite nephew, Uncle Ray." Attached was a chocolate bar. My entire body went cold. That was the final straw. I paced the living room until Diana returned from a grocery run, my teeth practically vibrating with tension. As soon as she walked in, I showed her the note, voice shaking. "Explain this." She paled, bags slipping from her arms to the floor. I didn't know. I told him to stop. I advanced on her, trembling. "So you're still in contact?" "No, Ethan, I swear," she pleaded. "I have no idea how that got there." My rage flared. My voice, thick with fury, came out in that interrogation tone again. "He's mocking me. Uncle Ray. This is my son, Diana. Mine. You think I'm going to let this slide?" She shook her head, tears brimming. "I'm so sorry. I'll handle it." I laughed without humor, stepping closer until she had to back away. "No, this time, I will." She stared at me, eyes wide, terrified. "What are you going to do?" I grabbed my car keys. "End it." And I left before she could protest. Ray's barbershop was a small, brightly lit space on a side street downtown, a place I'd never visited. I recognized it from the torn ticket stub, from the sign outside. Something about stepping through that door felt like crossing a point of no return. A bell jingled overhead. The shop was empty except for Ray, who stood behind a vintage barber's chair, wiping it down. He looked up sharply, recognition flickering in his eyes, followed by fear. I didn't wait for a greeting. "How dare you?" I snarled, stepping forward, fists already curled. "My son, you leave a note in his backpack. Are you trying to gloat?" He held up both hands, palms open. "Look, man, I didn't." "Don't lie to me," I roared, chest pounding. "You think you can stroll into my house, into my family, and do whatever you want. That kid is my life." He swallowed, color draining from his face. "Ethan, I swear, I'm not messing with you. I wanted him to know I still care." I braced a hand on the barber's chair, leaning closer, voice dropping to a hiss. "He doesn't need you. If you ever so much as whisper his name again, I couldn't finish the sentence. Rage twisted in my gut, choking me, an explosive flash of violence. My arm jerked upward, and before I realized it, I'd shoved him against the counter. Bottles of hair product rattled to the floor. Ray winced. "Stop. Please." My knuckles itched to slam into his jaw, to deliver the revenge I'd fantasized about for months. But in that split second, an image of my son flickered through my mind. His face if he saw me like this, out of control. So I drew a shaky breath and stepped back. "Don't ever contact him again," I spat, voice quivering with rage. "Or you'll regret it." Ray nodded vigorously, adjusting his shirt, gaze skittering away from mine. "I'm done. I won't." I jerked my chin at him, breath coming in short bursts. Then I turned and stomped out, letting the door slam behind me. I drove home trembling with adrenaline. The entire confrontation replayed in my mind, blow by blow. I realized how close I'd come to violence. Part of me wished I'd swung. Part of me was relieved I hadn't. When I arrived, Diana was waiting in the living room, pacing. She rushed to me as soon as I'd walked in. "Ethan, are you okay? What did you do?" I brushed past her without answering, heading to the kitchen for a glass of water. She followed, pressing me. I turned on her, voice low and tight. "I told him to stay away or I kill him." She paled. "God." We stood there, breath ragged, anger radiating. Then she reached out, her hand shaking as it tried to clasp mine. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I never wanted any of this." I closed my eyes, remembering the day I discovered the DNA test results, the stolen glances, the shower, all of it. "You destroyed my trust," I said, pulling my hand away. "I'm only here for him. Not for you." She started crying, shoulders trembling. I watched, numb. My own tears refused to come, locked behind walls of fury and betrayal. Eventually, I'd walked upstairs. She didn't follow. In the weeks that followed, Ray kept his distance. My son stopped getting suspicious notes or candy bars. But at night, I'd see the anxious look in Diana's eyes, the heaviness in her posture. She was terrified I'd either snap or leave for good. I wasn't sure which I'd do. Then, one night, I dreamed of my boy's face, calling me Dad. In the dream, he was older, wearing a graduation gown. I stood in the crowd, pride welling up, and out of nowhere, Ray appeared, claiming him, pulling him away. I woke in a cold sweat, fists clenched. "Ethan." Diana's voice drifted from the dark, cautious. "I'm fine," I muttered, though I was anything but. I stared at the ceiling for hours, wrestling with a painful truth. No matter how much I hated Ray, no matter how deeply Diana's betrayal cut me, that child meant the world to me. I'd do anything to protect him, even live with a daily reminder of his mother's infidelity. One afternoon, I got home to find a letter on the table. It was from the school, congratulating our son for his improved reading score. He'd always struggled with reading comprehension, but we'd worked on it together every night. Now he was excelling. My heart swelled with pride. Diana stood nearby, hands fiddling with the edge of her blouse. "He's so excited," she said, a tremor in her voice. I nodded, a hint of a smile tugging at my lips. "He should be." She took a step closer. "Ethan, you're a good father. Better than most men I've known. I'll never be able to fix what I did. But maybe we can move on. For him." I sighed, staring at the letter. "Moving on doesn't mean going back to how things were." She nodded, eyes filled with regret. "I know." I exhaled a shaky breath. "But I won't take his mother away from him. I won't destroy what little normalcy he has. Not now. If you want a divorce, we can talk about it. But if you're asking for a chance," she choked up. "Yes, I'm asking." I closed my eyes, the weight of months of agony pressing down on me. My chest felt tight. "Then for his sake, we'll try," I said, though the words tasted like salt in my mouth. She let out a sob of relief, tears streaming down her cheeks. I stood there, numb, arms by my side, letting her cry. Was it forgiveness? Not really. more like a ceasefire. Time slipped by, each day a slow, painful step through the aftermath of betrayal. We went to counseling sessions, sat in stiff chairs across from a therapist who asked questions that cut too close to the bone. Sometimes I snapped, sometimes Diana broke down. We tiptoed around the elephant in the room, the knowledge that I wasn't my son's biological father. But an odd thing happened. We learned to function in this new normal. She ended any ties with Ray. He never called. My son grew older, focusing on sports, friends, video games. I guided him through it all, teaching him how to handle bullies, how to show respect, how to take a shot in basketball. Inside, though, the anger stayed coiled, ready to spring. Some nights, lying in bed next to Diana. Yes, eventually I moved back to our bedroom. My mind replayed that day in the shower, the steam, Ray's face. My breath would speed up, and I'd have to step outside, stare at the moon, calm my racing heart. She'd watch me go, eyes sad, but never tried to stop me. A year passed, and my son turned 9. He had a party in the backyard. Pizza, a bounce house, a cluster of sweaty kids chasing each other around. I felt the sun on my back, watching him laugh. My chest tightened with the bittersweet knowledge. No one else in the world could be his dad the way I am, not even the man who gave him his DNA. Diana and I worked together, handing out slices of cake, snapping pictures. Occasionally our eyes met with a hint of a smile, as though we shared a secret. The secret was that we'd nearly destroyed each other. But for this moment, at least, we were a family. Later that evening, after the kids left, and the sun sank low, I found myself in the kitchen again, rummaging for a drink. I spotted that old coat hanging by the door. I pulled it off the hook, pressed it to my face. The perfume scent was gone, washed away by time. I hadn't needed the dry cleaners after all. It just faded on its own. Time doesn't heal, I thought. It erases. Slowly, relentlessly, it wears down the sharp edges of memory until you can hold them without bleeding. I stepped onto the back porch, coat draped over my arm, listening to the quiet hum of the suburban night. My chest was tight, but not in the same way as before. Anger was still there, but it flickered, softened by the resolve I'd built. I was still standing, still breathing, still my son's father. I stood there for a long time, letting the evening breeze brush across my skin. No matter what had happened, or what might happen down the line, I'd made a choice, to protect my boy, to keep some piece of myself alive. And I was going to keep that promise, even if it meant swallowing my rage every single day. Because maybe time doesn't heal the wound, but maybe it erases enough of the pain to let you move forward. Scared, yes, but still living. And in the end, that was all I could do.